Welcome to Satsang. Very good to see all of you. I'll bring the lights up a bit. There you are. I am very much looking forward to your participation in these satsangs more and more. And I want you to come here with questions. If you are practicing what we're discussing here, you will have lots of questions. I'm very intentionally, consciously trying to point you to the experience of realization. This is not something to be taken lightly. The planet, humanity, is evolving. Out of egoic identification with mind, which has caused lots and lots of problems, to conscious awareness, to the transcendent state. You are not the world. You are part of the world. If you become more conscious, the world becomes more conscious because you are a part of it. The most important thing that you can do for the planet is awaken, and then help others to awaken. But not until you have awakened. It can happen tonight. This is not something that you have to go sit on top of a mountain for 30 years. Some have done it that way. Some have been in hermitage. No one here is going to do that. But that doesn't mean that it's not possible for you. The difficulty is that we have been identified with mind for as long as we can remember. We learned language, we started remembering things, we started learning concepts, the idea about ourselves, the ideas about the world, and we have built this conceptual world in our minds. And we live like that world is real. Even though you can talk to your neighbor and realize that the world that they live conceptually and in their mind is a little different or completely different than the world you live in your mind. So the difficulty is that you're always going to refer to your mind and you're going to try to understand this conceptually. And I have to describe it to you conceptually. When you have that moment of realization, then you can throw the concepts in the garbage. But I want to be very clear that what I am leading you to, or pointing you to, is completely experiential and beyond concepts. Is that clear? Is there anyone that's not clear to?
Say the sentence, last sentence you said again.
What I'm I'm so terrible at that. The experience that I'm pointing you to is not a conceptual understanding, but an experience. Okay? And there really is no conceptual understanding of what I'm pointing to, but the difficulty is that you want to understand it conceptually. Paradox, right? So the difficulty is that we're struggling with our minds, right? Whether you realize it or not, all the trouble, all the problems that you think you have, all reside in one place, the mind. In the form of concepts, ideas, judgments. Is it getting a little cool in here for you? No, I know it's not you. You walk in and you bring the room temperature up a little. Is everybody else comfortable? Are you comfortable? Comfortable like that? Okay. If we need to, we can knock it up a degree. Despite Sherry's protests.
Summer stuff.
We have been trying to be happy. But the happiness that we have been trying to experience has been a mental happiness. In other words, we're happy when things are the way our mind thinks they should be. We're happy when things are the way our mind thinks they should be. But you notice in your own life that happiness is very, very short-lived, right? True? The mind is never really satisfied. There's a saying, once you get there, you realize there's no there. When I get my life this way, then I'm going to be happy. If I only had this, then I would be happy. If this was out of my life, oh my God, I would be so happy. And so you spend your life waiting for life to be a certain way so that you can be happy. How's that working? Do you see that you're even doing this? Wait, you have a comment? Go ahead.
It's just making me think about how you always say that you set up your life and your world for maximum serenity. You know, you have your Satsang list, your Zen list in the morning. I think that when we let go of things that are negative forces and negative things around us in the world, and we surround ourselves with positive people, you know, if we let go of the friends that are, and people, if family, it doesn't matter, that's just a word, that are dramatic, all the drama. When we let go of those people and say goodbye and walk away, and we create our world, quote unquote our world, with things that bring us joy. Positive people, positive things, quit a job that you hate and try and find something you love. When we set it up, then yeah, I feel like there's more happiness in my life. You know, so it is exterior things in a way. But I understand what we learn here, the core of us, the soul, to be centered. But I believe that there are things in our world that we have to set up as well. The rituals and the people and the places.
You will find that things have causes and conditions. Everything has causes. But you're still talking about the mind-based happiness. Happiness is not at all dependent on your life circumstances. Not really happiness, joyfulness, peacefulness. That doesn't mean that you don't take care of your body. It doesn't mean that you don't take care of your home. It doesn't mean that you don't strive to create an environment that you can flourish in, right? So that's what you're describing, okay? That becomes part of it. But what I'm pointing to is so much more grand than that. And what I first want to try and help you see is that what you're always fighting is your mind's opinion of yourself and your life. And your mind is always saying, life's good enough, life's not good enough, I need this, I need that, I need it to be this way, I need it to be that way. And that mind is very, very much interested in past and future. This is a very, very important part. Now, remember, I'm always encouraging you to inquire into yourself, to really bring consciousness into what the mind and body is doing. How the mind and body is creating pain for you, how the mind and body create confusion for you, how the mind and body are creating inner states for you that you don't want to experience. Because you know that that is not happening consciously, because there's no way that you would consciously create that for yourself. You wouldn't consciously create a negative, uncomfortable, painful state for yourself. In fact, you're consciously trying to do the opposite. Yet it still happens. Yet it still happens. So it's clearly not happening consciously. So the first part of what you really want to start doing in your practice is really bringing consciousness into your pain, into your mental and psychological formations, and you want to start to become aware of just what the mind is up to. Maybe you can't change it. Maybe you can't even recognize it, but you have to start to try. You know what I mean? You have to start to really sit as the awareness that is aware of the inner state. Because the problem is, remember, we're identified as mind. We're identified as that inner state. What does that mean, to be identified as it? Very important that you understand this.
We think we are our thoughts.
Microphone, please.
We think we are our thoughts.
We think we are our thoughts. We are identified as them. That voice in my head is me. That voice that won't shut up. That voice that says very rotten things at times to me about me. That voice that judges the world and judges other people. That voice that needs life to be a certain way. That voice that gets upset. That voice that's constantly yammering in your mind. Is that you? And listen, you'll know the answers because we've talked about this, and mentally you'll know the answers, but I'm not looking for a mental answer. It's okay to answer. I'm not saying don't answer. But again, it's easy to say, oh, I know that my mind is not me. Because you know that's the answer. But have you really experienced it? Have you really seen that? Have you really experienced that? Because that will be a moment in your life that you will never forget. The moment that you went, oh my gosh. And you realized that it couldn't be you. Because what's happening now for most people is that they are having this sort of mental understanding of mental understanding. In other words, what I mean by that is that they are thinking about, oh, well, you know, conceptually, I'm not my mind. I can see plainly I'm not my thoughts. And, you know, and there is this sort of fragmented mind that's thinking it's mind watching mind. Mind thinking about mind.
Can you elaborate for a few minutes on what you told us last week about, I keep forgetting the phrase, the psychological...
As everybody, this word psychological or mental formation is a word that people are really understanding. That, you know, what we suffer are mental formations. Now, what is a mental formation? A psychological formation? It's a conceptual creation, you know, not just a thought, but maybe a gang of thoughts, you know, that are interwoven to form a concept, but also the pain and the physical discomfort that is joined with them. The psychological formation. So, you know, a psychological formation can be something like, I'm not good enough. Nobody wants me. I'm never going to have the relationship that I want. And then, oh God, pain and like, man, what's wrong with me? I can't believe, what do I need to do? And I just can't figure it out. And I don't want to be alone, but I'm alone. And you see psychological formation when you're looking at it, when I'm acting it out here? When I'm trying to give some visualization to it? That's a psychological formation. And psychological formation, when you're identified as mind, very, very problematic. Causes a lot of suffering, causes a lot of blindness, causes a lot of bad choices too. That makes things worse. And then sometimes you even, you get what you want. Someone come into your life and they go, you feel the relief that you feel for a moment when your ego is satisfied. For a moment, that ego doesn't want anything. For a moment, that ego even disappears. But then what happens? Hey, I'm back. Now we need something else. Never happy. Insatiable. The mind. It's just never satisfied. Look back on your own life about we laugh about this sometimes in Satsang, about how our mind's like, wow, is this really my mind? How could it possibly be making things so miserable for me? Aren't you glad to know that your mind is not you? I mean, that rotten SOB. Your mind has said things to you about you that you would never say to someone else about them. It has been so rotten and mean to you at times. Your own mind. I find that fascinating. I work with a lot of students, and I have heard this for years and years and years, and it's really amazing. We all I'll say is we all have that very critical voice in our minds. And we just wrestle with it and wrestle with it.
Tommy, my mind was never mean or nasty about me. It was always mean and nasty about other people.
Right, really?
Yeah, like
Good, well,
there's
good
something
for you.
something someone said, something someone did, it was always affecting me deeply.
Yeah.
Other people's emotions coming at me.
Yeah.
It was never about me. It was always about things I couldn't control.
I would encourage you to really try to see that clearly. Because I think at the end of that rope, it's about you. Because if you were okay with yourself, it wouldn't matter what anybody else did. You know? Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
It's the button pushed in me.
Yes.
So this last year is what I've been working on, is focusing on me and why I'm reacting to
Yes.
what they're saying, what they're doing, and keeping it in perspective. And that it has nothing to do with me at all.
Yeah. Well, it's not that it doesn't have anything to do with you. Be clear about what I'm pointing to.
It's their story. Someone else's actions is just about where they are right now.
Yes, it is. But also, if it is affecting you, there's something going on in here. You know? There absolutely is. Because if there wasn't, it wouldn't be affecting you. It wouldn't push that button. And if it's a parent or a family member, people push your buttons, but, parents installed your buttons, so it's like they can really hit it right on the head over and over and over again, which is, I hate to say, very useful. It really is, because you need to see that. One of our most challenging psychological formations is our own belief system about ourselves. And many of us, if not all of us, I always like to leave myself a little wiggle room. There might be somebody out there, but we have such negative core belief system. It's just so easy for that to happen too, Sometimes it's just so innocent that happens. I mean, you could be like a 7-year-old kid and someone comes up to you, another 7-year-old kid in recess or at the park, and says, "You're ugly. Oh my God, you're ugly. Get away from me." And they run away. And you go, "Oh my God, I'm ugly?" And like for the rest of your life, like you believe that. You believe that you are living with the choices of a 7-year-old kid, whether you realize that or not. When we're young, we're old enough to make choices about ourselves and the world. They're not wise choices. We don't see things clearly then, but we make decisions back then about who we are, what we are, how the world is. And all of this is the conditioning of the mind. And so we spend our lives like trying to arrange life in some certain way that placates our mind. Does it work? Never. Never. So we might not know what to do, but we certainly know what not to do. Hey, is that Juan Perez? Juan, what's up, buddy? Congratulations, you're a new daddy. Just had a baby. Mind-based happiness. Arranging life in a way that your mind thinks it should be in order to be happy. is the perfect recipe to not be happy. It's the perfect recipe to be living in the future and not living in the now, and putting your happiness off to some other moment that you think is going to be better than this moment. Sound familiar? So let's be really, really conscious and cognizant that that is happening. Now, what do you know about life? Does life stay the same? Never. From moment to moment it changes. We're not even the people that drove to the Duncan Center an hour ago. We're already different people. And now we're different people. And now we're different people. And now we're different people. So we're trying to hold static something that is not static. We're trying to say that we need things to be a certain way when we know that it's just like a constant kaleidoscope of ever-changing, always changing. And our complete misconception is that we have to do something or that life needs to be a certain way in order to feel peace and joy. Look back on your own life. Is that true? And then there can be a time in life when you really want to figure it out. And you can develop this sort of insatiable hunger for knowledge, you know, to consume self-help book after self-help book, trying to figure it out, trying to understand. Why am I not happy? Why am I not peaceful? What do I need to do? Here's where you're going to love me. You don't have to do anything. I'm not giving you any homework. Peace and joy are your natural state. They are what's there in the absence of this mind. It is what's there in the absence of thinking. You know, we've talked about this, that you don't suffer what happens. You suffer your thoughts about what happens. The way you think things should be, your mental and psychological formations. This is what you suffer. If a coconut hit you on the head on the way out the door and you got amnesia, you couldn't suffer all the stuff you're suffering right now. You'd... What?
I said, please,
Yeah, where's the coconut tree? Yeah. It's true, isn't it? What does that tell you? We are suffering our psychological and mental formations that are random, arbitrary, conditioned, habitual ways of thinking and being, and none of them matter, and none of them are real, and it's all illusory, and it's all a bunch of garbage. You are suffering your imagination, or you are suffering your memories, neither of which have anything to do with this moment. Is there a problem in this moment? Nope. Might be a little warm for some of you, but but other than that, there's no problem. So where are you at? What are you hearing? Am I making sense? Should they put me in a straitjacket?
Yeah. I was just thinking about the exterior things that cause us unhappiness. You know, you're losing your home. You've gotten fired. You know, the death of a child. Just these exterior things that happen around us that cause us suffering.
Yeah, see, they don't cause suffering. It really appears that way. You know, at the loss of a loved one or something like that, you know, you're not going to be happy. But you will be, but if you reside as the self, you'll be very peaceful. You will be very peaceful with your sadness.
That's the challenge.
I wouldn't, that's the realization. Don't set up a psychological formation that this is a challenge, because it's really not a challenge. And really, it's very easy, just not from where you're sitting. Because the problem is that you are so identified with your mind, as the thoughts in your mind, you are so identified as those, that you can't even really imagine what it would be like to be without it. To be without your identification. To be without your mental stories. It's like, yeah, you know, I get what you're saying, but if I let all this go, I let me go. If I let all this go, I let me go. I let the world that I created in my mind go. I let the concept that I created of myself go, who I think I am, who I've always thought that I was, or who I think that I am now. You see the difficulty in letting go of this mind identification? Do you know what I mean? It's the only thing that you know. And I'm saying, hey, throw that in the garbage. And you're like, what? I want peace and joy and all, but I want my mind too. Can't have both. Not in this way. Mind is ultimately a part of self. But mind serves the self. Mind, right now, mind is in charge of the self. Imagine if you had a baby and the baby was in charge, telling you what to do. Doesn't make any sense, right? That's kind of what's going on for you right now. Your mind had a baby. Let's hear it. You must have questions. Don't be shy. There are 2 microphones. There's one there, Susie, if you want to talk. Just in case. What's making sense? What's not making sense?
What I found the most interesting on this topic is how your mind can bring something up, just somebody saying one sentence or one word from when, let's say, when you're 7 years old. It's almost like you have all these files stored and someone says one word or one sentence and all of a sudden your mind reaches back 30 years ago, pulls out a file, says, oh yeah, look at this one.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost ridiculous. I mean,
It's ridiculous. There's no
Yeah.
almost about
Yeah.
it.
so I'm kind of like you. I find it so interesting.
Yes.
And then when I catch myself seeing that happen, sometimes I'll smile. I'm just like, it's unbelievable that I was getting upset about something as silly as that.
Yeah. That happened 100 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it helps me when I catch it to find humor in it and find it interesting.
You know, it's when you're doing that, that's a very important moment, because in that moment, whether you realize it or not, you're realizing yourself as the watcher. You're like, look at this ridiculousness going on in my mind. You know, just look at this. Look at what my mind is doing. You know, I share sometimes that, like, sometimes I'll be in the kitchen cooking, and for some reason my mind starts going down the rabbit hole. I just throw my stuff down and I look up like, would you just shut up? Just shut up for a minute. Just, I don't want to hear it anymore. Just leave me alone. Just go away.
Do you say that out loud?
Yes, but I live alone, so, you know, the cat looks at me like, you know, but... Yes, absolutely out loud, because I want to make sure I'm heard. Because it makes you batty. You know, what's going on in my own mind is not things that I want to go on in my mind, and I can't turn them off. That's why practice is so important. Because what's happening is your attention is getting, you know, distracted by those things. You notice that, you know, that file that you talk about, you know, the memories, that whole file of all these memories, you know, they're in the past. So you're here in the now, but in your mind you're in the past. So you're not here. And I encourage you to begin to notice not only when you're not here in the moment, but how often you're not here in the moment, wherever you are. These mental, psychological formations that we are constantly dancing with. And then, if there's a little pain about that moment, then that'll really hijack your mind. That'll really pull you back up into your mind. This is a really, really important part of the teachings. That you are a different person when you are in pain. When I'm talking about emotional pain. Something happens and you start to feel that emotional pain. Do you notice in your own life that nothing is easy? Getting up and making the bed isn't easy. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to eat. You know, you're not motivated. You know, you're not thinking clearly. You're making poor choices. You're just dragging yourself through the day. You're just trying to make it to the end of the day so you can get to bed and forget about it and try again tomorrow. Because today is already a wash. It's already a failure. Okay.
What I've noticed, though, is then when you really focus on the pain, you were talking to me about, instead of kind of numbing it out or trying to even figure it out with the brain, to try to just feel where it's coming from and be present to it. I was going to use comfortable, but that's because It's not a.
Well, present
It's
is a good word.
present. But what I've found is, to some degree, I'll have phases of what you're talking about, where there's this presence, and in that there's no judgment, where a lot of the pain becomes aggravated because there's the literal judgment of, why am I in pain? What did I do to create a life for myself that I'm in this situation, and what kind of loser am I that I'm? And so there's this whole, it's almost like pouring salt into the wound kind of effect. So at the same time, I also feel like there's something like, it's almost like it rears its head and becomes really intense. And I don't know if then it's focusing too much, or, I mean, but you become almost disabilitated to function. You know,
Is
like,
that for long periods of time, or
no,
is that
just briefly. Like, I was paying
Yeah.
attention to the pain, and then I was like, I kind of accepted both worlds. I decided to be with it. I was meditating with it for an hour, which is a very long time for me to
Awesome.
deal with that.
awesome?
And then I kind of rewarded myself because I was exhausted. I was like, I can't do work. I can't. So I went to go see a friend. And she was doing bills. She invited me over, but it was one of those situations where I would have been more entertained in a bathroom by myself listening to I mean, they were just, no one was there. And I was really craving, some kind of distraction and,
Or connection.
yeah. And so when I was driving home, it was like I felt like a little kid, like when you're about ready to cry in class or something. I was like, just make it home. Just make it home. Because if you
Right.
start crying, I felt like it was going to be so intense, I wouldn't be able to drive. Like, I would
Yeah.
have to, like, pull over. But then I didn't know if that was me still feeling the pain from before, or if that was, I don't know. And almost to the extent that I was realizing it was a relinquishing, but it was also this fear, kind of what you're saying about letting go of your mind. I was like, I can't even suss out why I feel this way. So being with it to some degree is a relief, because there's no judgment, but there's still the mind that's like, but if you figure it out, then it'll go away. And focusing on it doesn't necessarily make it go away. It just makes you more present to it, and more, I don't know, almost like a mother, to a child, like, oh, it's okay. And
Let me share with you something. When you are getting close to a breakthrough, the curve is like this: pain, 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 pain. Goes straight up, and your mind starts screaming, and the pain gets really intense, and then pop, and all of a sudden you're just different. And you never experience it quite like that again. It takes a lot of trust, I think, in those moments to stay with it. But I want you to know what's happening, that yes, when you're staring at the pain, and there was some identity with the pain, sometimes we can become identified with our pain, and you're staring at the pain and you're saying no more, the pain starts screaming louder and louder and louder, and you're like, scream, let me have it, give me your best shot, right now, right in the face, I'm ready for it, just let me have it. And it goes, "Rah!" Poof, and you go, and all of a sudden you begin to realize that there wasn't really anything there, anything tangible.
But don't you think the pain's coming from somewhere? I mean, I don't think, as you said, if our natural state is to be joyous, and like,
It's a psychological formation. So you're facing down the psychological formation. Because here's the reality. The reality is that there's nothing wrong right now, and that however you're feeling and however you're reacting, is very disproportionate to what's happening now. So we all have pain inside us that reaches back to our childhood. It could be an inner child that's reaching out for love. It could be a past traumatic experience. When I was a kid, I got the strap, the wooden spoon, those kind of things. We all have pain. And the one thing that I'm really noticing is that when I start talking about pain in satsang, everybody sits up. Everybody's like, okay, okay.
Well, I guess that's what makes sense of it, because what I was going to say is that there doesn't seem to be a psychological formation that's apparent to me, and trust me, I'm pretty good at tearing apart things, analyzing it, ripping apart,
Yes.
putting it together, and I'm just like, I don't even know where this is coming from. It's like,
When I experience that and I sit with it, and I'll just be observing the pain with no judgment, not trying to push it away, not trying to pull it closer, just sort of really taking a look at saying, what is this? Like, why is this uncomfortable feeling here inside me that I don't want to feel? And then what I'll do is I will sit and I will try to see where the connections are in my mind. In other words, I'll start observing some thoughts. And then I'll hit a thought about something and I feel that energy move. Like, wow. And then I start thinking thoughts sort of around and related to that thought. And I feel it move and feel it move. And then sometimes I hit the root thought and I feel this weird connection go on and it just breaks up.
but that's confusing to me, because I thought you were saying to sit with it and not to think about it.
I wasn't thinking about it. I was just sort of poking around, watching. Let me explain more clearly. Let me be more clear. When I'm doing that, I am residing as the self, the awareness that is aware of this psychological formation. So I am just in observance of the psychological formation. I'm not really thinking about it. I'm observing what thoughts are there and trying to be really conscious and observant to the thoughts that are there. But I'm not thinking about it. I'm noticing the thoughts that are already there. How do I know they're already there? Because I can feel the pain. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is where it's difficult. For students, I understand this, and I will work as hard as I possibly can with you to try and help you experience that which is beyond the mind. Because the problem is that you are thinking about it, and that is just a dog chasing its tail. That is psychological formations trying to be in agreement with other psychological formations. It is not the pure observer. So I'm poking around. I'm looking at thoughts related to thoughts. I'm trying to see this psychological formation. I'm trying to use the pain to point me to these thoughts that are scary thoughts that are related to the pain. Sometimes I can do it. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes just being present to the pain is enough to break it up, to bring me into presence and break it up, without me ever knowing what the thoughts were. But sometimes when I catch the thoughts, and then I feel a very strange feeling inside. It's like I knocked a domino over and they all, and it's gone. So there's both. I encourage you to continue to do that. And this is not to sit there and suffer. You know what I mean? I'm not telling you to sit there and suffer, okay? I'm telling you to sit there and just observe and just be with what's so. Be in full acceptance of your inner state and just watch it. Just look at it. Just become very aware of it. And realize that you are the one watching. Notice too that the more present you become, that pain starts to wane. It starts to break up. Why? Because the thoughts that are associated with it, what are those thoughts about? In general terms. Say it, you know. What are those thoughts about? The past or the... Yeah, right. The past or the future. So when you come fully into the present moment and you're totally present, if you're really present, does past and future exist? No. And that's why when you bring your attention to it, when you bring your the consciousness to it, when you're sitting there aware, you know, because when we're feeling this pain, when we're feeling this discomfort, we run from it. And we run to the past, we run to the future. Oh my God, what happened? Why is this here? I need to fix this, you know? Or, you know, oh my God, is my whole life going to be like this and I don't want to feel this way? So coming into presence is enough to transform that pain. That's very true. It may not be instant. It may take a few days. It may take longer. But even while you're at work, even while you're doing, you can still be present to your inner state. If you're at work and you're doing something at work and you're feeling pain inside you, then that's just what's so. It's not a problem. And as you come more and more present into the moment, you are dissolving your ego. Ego exists in past and future. And so, you will notice that when you become present, that you access, not even access, it's not like that. There is something that's always there, your true nature of just peacefulness and joyfulness, that is somehow now not obscured by thoughts about past and thoughts about future. You are like the sun. The mind is like the clouds. The sun is always the sun, radiating love in all directions, indiscriminately, not saying, oh, you get some light but you don't, and you get some but you don't. None of that. It's just, it's like the sun. But then the mind come, and future, thoughts about past come, and the clouds come, right? And the sun can't shine through the clouds. But is the sun still there? Absolutely. And your nature of peacefulness and joyfulness is always there, without exception. It's always been there your whole life. It's always been available to you, but it has been obscured by the mind. If you have no interest in thoughts about past and thoughts about future, what's your mind going to do? Do you know what I mean? That's where your mind always is. If you're just here in this moment with me, what's there to think about? But we have this habitual, addictive tendency, feel the need to think all the time. That somehow thought is important. That somehow we need to constantly be thinking. That if I'm not thinking, then something's wrong. I'm disappearing. Thought, on and on from the moment that you wake up and you open your eyes. You know, maybe you don't even open your eyes yet. Before you open your eyes. Right up till you sleep again. It's very annoying. It's not necessary. It's not necessary. But when you're identified as mind, when the mind goes, your identification goes. Who you are goes. And so you stay with it because it's what you know. Would you grab that microphone? Here, there's another one right here.
Some people are just born with a chemical disposition, and predisposition to just have depressive thoughts, or these feelings, in their body, and maybe they need medication. But that's an individual thing for them to find out. But for people who just, I don't know, sometimes they might even go a step further, like towards schizophrenia, where it's like they see things that aren't there, or feel things that aren't there, that aren't happening. And I'm just wondering if everything you're teaching us still applies to those situations, where to just get yourself under control, just breathe and feel the love and the light and the sunshine and the, when you just feel like everything around you is so out of control.
What's so interesting about those types of things is that you can see that how the structure of another being's mind can totally affect the way they're perceiving and the world that they're in. I can tell you that the shamans in South America, when they see people with schizophrenia or those types of things in their society, those people are revered. And they are treated very differently than they are here. And, it is thought, by the shamans that these people are sort of almost caught between two worlds and trying to bring information into this world, but the energies don't match, so a shaman tries to really balance that person's energy. And there's really far too, I am certainly not an expert in any of this, but if you wanted to do some research on that and learn a little bit about it for yourself, you will see that there are lots of different point of views to mental illness and all of that. But what it does point to is that, your mind is your reality, and other people's mind are their reality. What happens when you go beyond the mind? That's what we're here for. What happens when there is no mind? What if you had no thoughts right now? And you didn't for the next hour? Yeah. Okay, because I brought these pills. No. Take two. The reason that we stay so stuck to the thoughts in the mind is because we have this sort of addictive identification with thought. And we have really trained ourselves, our mind, to think. And so it's very hard for us to stop and let go of that. It is a conditioned, habitual way of thinking and being. And this is why, satsang is very important. Because one, you get to come here and ask your questions and be in this energy. Satsang is also like a tuning fork. Do you notice that when you leave satsang, regardless of what's said, you usually feel a little better, you feel a little grounded, you feel a little centered, and somehow you're more present? That's all of our energy coming together, and we're vibing off each other. when we all come together and we come to presence together, you know, it can be easier to do in a group like this. So, you know, satsang is like a tuning fork for you. When you can just come, and regardless of what's being said here, whether you're interested or not or whatever, you will still walk out feeling different. So to go beyond, you know, like the cognitive is to really start to experience, you know, either here or in your own practice, you know, these moments of no mind, and don't be afraid of them. Don't run from them. In the beginning of my practice, you know, not even maybe my practice, maybe, you know, in my early 20s, if I would have a still moment and thoughts would stop, I would go, oh my God, I'm not thinking, where are my thoughts? And I would go running looking for them. Because I didn't know how to be without thoughts. Can you be without thoughts? Can you be without thoughts? Can you rest in silence? Can you let go of all of your ideas, all of your mental and psychological formations, and just be in this moment and be nowhere else? This is what you're practicing. Because once you start to experience little snippets of it, it will be so sweet to you that you will naturally be drawn to it. You'll be like, man, okay. I got a glimpse of home. And home is not somewhere that I'm going. Home is somewhere that I am. And I'm casting away all the things that are obscuring my view of home, my experience of home. It's so beautiful to just be happy for no reason, like a child. To be really present in the moment. The real ultimately, you will experience this state when you are completely present in the moment. And you can look back on your own life and recognize that this happens. Am I right or am I wrong? A lot of times, like it happens with kids, particularly younger kids, because they're so present. You ever playing with, you know, sons, daughters, nieces, nephews, and all of a sudden they're like laughing and you're laughing, and like next thing you know, that the only thing that's happening is you're there with them, and it's this really wonderful feeling, right? That's the feeling of presence. Presence is the absence of past and future. Presence is the absence of past and future. If there was no past and there was no future, which is only a psychological formation anyway, and you were just here, I mean literally, there was no past and no future, and you were just here in this moment, what would that feel like? What would there be to be concerned about in this moment? What would there be to be upset about in this moment? What would there be to create pain in you in this moment? Nothing. 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 And your mind right now is saying, oh yeah, but you got to think about the future, and No, you don't. No, you don't. And the less you do, the better off you'll be. And I'm not saying be irresponsible. You may need to plan for the future. You may need to save money or do this or do that, right? Okay. But even in the planning for the future, you're present in the moment to planning for the future. You see what I mean? So even though you plan to create the conditions for something to hopefully manifest in the future, right? You're still not in the future. You're in the now, planting seeds. Would anybody like to share something? What are you hearing? So reach.
A year or two ago, I had taken a triggers class, which was over the course of like 2 months.
You said a triggers class?
A triggers
Oh,
class. When your buttons. You know, these things that arise in us, these feelings that sometimes come before the thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you feel this pain
Yeah.
from something. It could be anything.
Yeah.
And he was very spiritual. He was like on another level, another plane of existence, this teacher. And he explained it, and I still use it today, and I just wanted to share it because when you start to feel that pain, he said, like exactly what you teach us, concentrate on what part of your body are you feeling that in.
Mm-hmm.
It's different for everyone. It could be your neck, your headache, your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
He said, close your eyes and focus your energy on that area and sit with it. Don't try and figure it out. Don't try and think about it. And bring the love and light to that area. Embrace it like a mother embracing a child, like what Dawn was talking about, you know. Focus on that area and see this beautiful light filling it and just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, you know, if you have to keep doing it over a course of a few days, a few weeks, whatever, but focus on the area of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that really practical.
What happened to the pain when you did that?
Sometimes it went away.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was still there.
Yep.
And then it would just dissipate when I wasn't thinking about it.
Yep.
But, you know, there's always something every day that might cause us a twinge.
Sure.
A knife in your
Yeah,
heart,
yeah,
or
yeah.
even just a small thing being cut off in traffic.
Right.
But, and most of us just let it go in that moment. You know, some people carry it with them. And I just found it that when it was the more intense things, like what Dawn was sharing, just these triggers that they don't even know where it comes from. It's like, what is it with soldiers?
PTSD.
PTSD from an old war wound.
Mm-hmm.
And you start feeling that anger, or you feel to just breathe and close your eyes and focus that light and that love that's in your heart and soul.
Now, the interesting thing is that I always want you to know the reason that we do things. I'd like to share with you the whys so that you understand. I don't want you to just blindly do what I tell you to do. I want you, I want you to be a teacher someday. I want you to seek what Buddha sought. I want you to really, approach this as, I want to understand this and let this go and come to peace and then help others do the same. It's one of the most important things that you can do in life, okay? So what we're doing is that we're noticing that these uncomfortable states are arising in us unconsciously. What you are doing is you are bringing your consciousness to it. Because these things are from our conditioned mind, the way that our mind has been programmed, and habitually are just happening. They're just automatic habits. They're just happening. When you bring your consciousness to it, you begin to at first slow it down. Sometimes you can completely stop it. Sometimes you can only slow it a little. But the more you just stay conscious to, sometimes I'll even say, hey, mind, we're not doing that anymore. Okay, so I just need you to stop. All right, don't create this pain for me. I don't want it. You know, I'll say this out loud. You know, like, mind, this is not necessary right now. This doesn't have anything to do with the moment. Stop. And I find that my mind stops. You know, my mind... No?
Sometimes it works.
So, but, you know, sometimes is good. You know what I mean? If it works sometimes, the more you practice it, the more it works. You know, and it's not even like works. It's not like some magic trick. It's just that some things are nested way deeper inside of us. So it takes more time, more conscious. You know what I mean? Some things are really scary. Some things are really hurtful. We have pain in us. But the idea is that we are bringing consciousness to that which is now unconscious. And by bringing our consciousness to it, now we have say in the matter. Now it's like, okay, let's break this up. Let's let this go. Let's not create this anymore. But it's such a habitual thing. Like, understand, it is a habitual, you know, like it's just the way that we're kind of wired. Even after a traumatic event, like a war veteran or something, went to war, got wired that way. Wasn't wired that way, went to war, got wired that way, and now has to let that wiring go. And let the mind know, and let whatever coping mechanisms, you know, developed, let them go. Because these are survival instincts. You know what I mean? You know, the mind is a survival tool. But when we're in a place where we're flourishing and we're not surviving, we don't need these survival tools anymore. Perhaps at one point in life we did. Perhaps at one point in life, you know what I mean? We weren't in a place where we were in different circumstances. You know, that required, like me when I was a kid and I'm getting, you know, lovingly abused by parents who loved me but still was abusive. You know, they were passing on what was done to them. You know, so when I was a kid, I needed survival mechanisms. I needed to cope. I needed to deal. You know, and, you know, that's the fear of death. You know? When that happens. So you got to be gentle with yourself. You know, like, you got to understand this stuff. This stuff is not, you know, like, didn't come from nowhere. We all have pain. You know, it comes up in us. Be gentle, but gently, without judgment, bring your consciousness to it and begin to release it. Begin to say, I don't need this anymore. I don't want this anymore. I don't like this anymore. This is not something that I need. So I'm very consciously bringing my consciousness into it and releasing it. And you may have lots to release. You may be waves of it. There might always be layers of the onion. But I can tell you that it gets easier and easier and easier as time goes on. You know what I mean? It's not so... You know, the first couple layers of the onion, they're really like, wow, you know what I mean? They're really... But it gets more and more subtle as time goes on. You know? And it gets a little easier, and you begin to be able to change it in its subtle form. And you become just not so tolerant of the mind-body creating these inner states for you. You're just like, no. Why? Because you are residing as the self, and you realize the self. It is the self that's saying, the mind, you work for me. I don't work for you. You work for me, and you will do as I say. And as you reside as the self, the mind has no choice but to do as you say. Because the thoughts need you to exist, but do you need the thoughts to exist? No way. No way. And so as you reside more and more, like you have these moments of just peacefulness and joyfulness, and you realize you're present in the moment, and you go, oh, this is what I think Tom was describing to me. And it's so undeniable, and I love it. And shoom, you get sucked back into your mind, but you go, whoa, I know what that was. And then you keep coming back to it, and you keep coming back to it, and you keep coming back, and it starts to, it's what you are anyway. And little by little, you know what I mean? It starts, you start to just reside as the self, and now you're watching the mind, and you're like, hey. And it's so, and you're not, remember something, presence is not thinking about the present moment. Okay? So if I'm going to be present to the bowl, I'm not sitting here going, oh, it's red and it's round, it's beautiful and it sounds good and all this other stuff. Don't do that. If I'm going to be present to the bowl, I'm just going to be present to the bowl. I can observe this bowl without thinking about it. For hours. I'm not joking. When you realize, that thoughts are optional, and you realize that thoughts can create a lot of pain, it's very easy to get away from them. You don't want them anyway. You're just so habituated into them that you don't know what you are without them. But once you feel the soothing peace and joy of being without them, it's like, get away from me. What do I want to think for? Why would I ever want to do that?
People don't realize it takes time, and it takes practice. They're not going to feel at peace or feel centered in joy if their entire day and days are running from one activity to another. All this stress is going on. They have no time for themselves. They're not meditating. They're not eating right. They're skipping meals. They're surrounded by drama. If this is what their days are like, they're not going to have any center. It'll feel like one day dragging right into another of a raging river. They don't realize they actually have to be present. Take 5 minutes to meditate. Drink water throughout the day. Eat the meals. Get away from the drama and have some quiet time and rest.
The interesting thing is that once you do come to presence, you can be in that raging river and be present, and it won't bother you.
Most people know.
But listen.
I hear what you're saying.
But you got to get out of the river first, and then you can jump back in. You know what I mean? Like, in fact, when you're present, you're very productive. You know what I mean? Like, and your insight is not really coming from the mind. It's coming from something far more insightful than the mind. Artists talk about this a lot when they're painting or they're doing something that their mind is gone and it's coming from another place. So, the mind is a wonderful tool to be used, but put down when you're done with it. You see? Are there any more comments? Is this making sense to you? Listen, I really, really am very intently on pointing you to this experience. I really don't want to fill your head up with knowledge. I want to empty it. And I want you to come, understand, and start to experience moments of pure presence. Because in that moment, It will be undeniable to you. So I urge you to practice, to have a meditation practice every day. You know, like Shari was saying, you know, eat right, exercise, all the Zen list stuff. You know, you're kind of creating the perfect conditions for you to have these realized moments, these satori experiences, just so that you get a taste of what I'm talking about, so that you know it's real. And when you experience it for yourself, you're going to hear my words so differently. You know, the mindless, thoughtless state being described in words is just such a terrible way to do it, but there's no other way to do it.